administration interfered with a federal investigation into how Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah turned profits on illegal drugs and weapons trafficking. According to the report, the previous administration didn't want anything to get in the way of a nuclear deal with Tehran. Now, you'll remember, we spoke with the investigative reporter who broke the story.
Federal investigators were watching and gathering evidence of Hezbollah sort of transforming itself from a political power and a terrorist organization to one that was trafficking in drugs. And they documented was that they were doing it to raise money to help rebuild after the Israel war and to help an expansion that they were doing globally. So they gathered evidence. They designated about a couple of dozen super facilitators as people that were connected to the conspiracy. But when they really tried to delve deeply into these people, they got shut down.
Tonight, we are bringing you an exclusive interview with Derek Maltz. He's the former special agent in charge of the DEA Special Operations Division, quoted extensively in that Politico report. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Shannon.
I want to read a little bit of what you said there. You said, there's no doubt in my mind now that the focus was this Iran deal, and our initiative was kind of like a fly in the soup. We were the train that went off the tracks. At what point did you realize all this intel you had gathered about the millions that Hezbollah was laundering, even through this country and making around the globe, wasn't going to be prosecuted?
Well, I found it very, very odd that in our backyards all over America, they were sending used cars back into West Africa to sell, and the profits of these used cars and all this drug trafficking money was going back to support Hezbollah at the tune of $200 million a month in businesses throughout our country. So I found it kind of odd that we didn't have a unity of effort to actually shut it down. I found it odd that we didn't have leadership in the administration that would actually enforce and hold people accountable to bring the agencies together to ensure that we can protect the American public. It was very strange.
You were in a meeting, at least one meeting that I know of, with Attorney General Eric Holder, who seemed to be interested in this. You were told there would be a follow-up, that they would be getting back to you. What happened?
Well, Eric Holder was very supportive of the Special Operations Division. I was very fortunate to be in charge of that for almost 10 years, and almost every operation he actually approved and was supportive. Well, in this particular case, we briefed Eric Holder. He was very alarmed by the findings of this particular investigation and the magnitude of money and drugs that were moving around the world. So Eric Holder was pretty, serious about having follow-up meetings with national security team members, and the briefing never happened. So it was very strange for me sitting there listening to the Attorney General of the United States directing his people to have a meeting to get more information from the DEA and our interagency partners about this global trade-based money laundering scheme, and they weren't interested. It never happened. I can't explain it.
In the meantime, the administration was also working on a deal with Iran over its nukes. There is Josh Meyer, who did the Politico piece, talked to you and others, and came to this idea that it's possible that's what this was all about. They didn't want to go heavy on Hezbollah because they wanted to get that nuke deal done. Is that your impression?
Well, look, I don't have any information on what was going on behind the scenes on the Iran nuke deal. Honestly, from my perspective, if you have this magnitude of money and drugs moving through our country and the banks in our country, that should have been something that our government enforced full accountability on all the agencies to work together and shut it down.
But it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. We had some significant successes. We had tremendous, response from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. We did a $480 million civil seizure on the bank and 30 businesses. But you know what's sad, Shannon? We put 30 businesses in this action, but there were actually hundreds of businesses that are still operating today. Today. In this country, there are cars moving, going to West Africa. The car parks are lined up and they're booming. If you look at the Wall Street Journal article at the end of 2016, they talked about how these car parks are exploding, not just in Benin, but all over West Africa. And they're coming from our backyards, right here in our country.
And you're saying this is how the money is being laundered?
The money is being laundered. It's supporting Hezbollah. They're buying weapons. They're coming up with their logistics. You see, criminals are turning, terrorists are turning to criminal networks for their funding. State sponsorship is down. They need funding to operate. They need funding to corrupt government officials. Drug trafficking and other criminal activity around the world is helping to generate hundreds of millions of dollars. The UN estimated that drug trafficking a few years ago was generating $400 billion a year around the world. The terrorists are taking advantage of this opportunity. Financially, yes. They need the money to operate.
I want to let you reply to a couple of Obama administration officials who have had shot down what you said. First of all, Marie Harper used to be with the State Department. We'll play her.
You know, the Politico story, this narrative in it is just false. And there's no evidence in this story to back up their allegations. They quote a couple of low-level ideological sources who clearly don't like the Iran deal.
Low-level ideological
Low-level sources. I was the head of the Special Operations Division for over 10 years, 30 different agencies, 3 countries, the NYPD, to protect this country. That lady didn't work on the operation. She worked as a bureaucrat in Washington talking about, you know, policy and stuff, but she wasn't involved day to day in the operation. She didn't see what we saw every day on the streets of America and in Europe, in West Africa, and so I have a problem with her. You're referring to the low-level sources. The folks that spoke about the story actually were intricately involved in every aspect of this case. And as a matter of fact, David Asher was the expert in the first 3/11 action against North Korea, and he was the one that helped us put together the Patriot Act 3/11 action in this case to shut down this international trade-based money laundering scheme.
We thank you staying here to break some fact from fiction for us and for all of your work for this country as well. Derek, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much. The only last thing I would like to say to the viewers is that this particular photo right here from Admiral Jim Stavridis with a fireball is why we were trying to shut this scheme down.
We'll tweet it out so people know what it is.
Thank you, Shannon.
More news next.
Life expresses itself as an endless flow of energy.